Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Showing Up to Your Life podcast and YouTube channel. Art Burns here on what is my Monday morning and is your Wednesday, at least if you watch it on the day that I'm recording it, which I don't know you will, but that's what's going on. And it's actually very late in the morning, and I wanted to kind of talk about this real quick because, I found myself this morning in a perfect example of what I'm always trying to explain to all of you, right? So normally, especially on Wednesday morning, right? It's the beginning of the week, I don't do very well with like sort of easing into the day. It's just something that I'm just not, it's just not a comfortable thing for me, right? When I know I have something to do, right, I like to get it done and I like to have it behind me, right? If I kind of leave, like, for instance, recording a video, normally what I do, my morning routine is as such, right? I wake up, I do my meditation, sometimes I do some exercise. I haven't been doing much lately. I've just been feeling a little tired. Do a little bit of exercise just to wake my body up, have some water, maybe have like a banana or something, right? And then I kind of get into work, right? Like that's my idea. Now again, it depends on what I have going on, right? Like if, knowing I always have to record a video, right? So that's always something that's kind of on my mind, right? And so what I try to do is sometimes I have early morning appointments, right? Sometimes I have to meet with people at like 8, 9 o'clock, And so if that's the case, then I just go right into my meetings and I do my podcast after that, right? But there are other days like today, right, where I had a meeting scheduled at 10:30, didn't wind up happening. And that happens, right? But then after this meeting, I've got like kind of like a lot going on after that, right? So that's where it becomes tricky, right? Like if I don't do the video, if I don't do it, before like 9 o'clock, then my next available option is going to be somewhere like in the middle of the afternoon. And so one of the things that I concern myself about, right, or that concerns me about that is that, what's my energy going to be like, right? And a lot of times I feel like, it's just not going to feel as good, right? But now that's where I get stuck, right? Now, as I tell you all the time, right? Just practicing mindfulness and emotional intelligence and practicing, as I tell you, does not mean that you become immune or just completely absent of any getting stuck and kind of reverting back to the old sort of habitual ways, right? And kind of allowing ourselves to get caught in not being present, right? And so so one of the things that happens to me, right, is that if I have this video to do, it kind of just, it wears on me. And so it prevents me from being present. But I shouldn't say it prevents me because it's not doing anything, right? It's just a video that's not even made yet, right? And so it's not that the video prevents me from being present and kind of just being open to whatever time I record the video, right? I make myself that way, right? And so this morning I started getting a little tense. I had a bunch of stuff that I had to kind of deal with, family stuff and just, kind of, I had to water some plants this morning. It's just like a really busy morning for some reason. And the whole time I'm like, oh my gosh, I have this meeting. And if I don't do my video before I get to do the meeting, well then, who knows who knows where I'm going to be. And so I started getting tense, right? And that's where I caught myself, right? And so, so being present, right? Especially when we talk about mindful presence, right? Because you can be present just sort of haphazardly, happenstance, right? I guess is the word that I'm really looking for. You can stumble upon periods, moments of presence, right? But with mindfulness, what we're doing is we're cultivating presence, right? And so being present in mindfulness, the core aspect of that, the real essence of that presence is an openness to the presence. Okay? Now, what that means, right, is that when we have an expectation, when we have a set sort of value of how the day is supposed to be, well, even though we might be present, I feel like I was present this morning in my frustration, right? But I was not open, right? I was not open to allowing things to just. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm allowing whatever happens to happen, right? So, oh, well, I didn't get to do my video today, so what? No. That's not at all what I'm talking about, right? What I'm talking about is there's no reason why I can't record the video at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, right? And even though that doesn't fit within this sort of schema that I have about how this is supposed to happen, right? Or how I desire it to happen, right? Even though it doesn't fit that, it doesn't mean that it's going to be bad, right? It doesn't mean that I can't do a podcast at 4 p.m. that might actually be the best podcast I ever did, right? There's no telling, right? And that's the way that our expectations can oftentimes show up as judgments, right? Like that's how it works. That's how it sort of sneaks in there on us, right? That when I have this expectation, like recording a podcast after, and there's also sort of the logistic part of this, right? That I know that if I don't record it till 4, well, then many of you won't get to even see it today, right? Because you're already home with your family and making dinner and all that kind of stuff. And so maybe your opportunity to see it now has been taken away from you. And that's also an obligation that I have, right? So there's some legitimacy to this, right? But again, right, to make assumptions that you're making dinner and can't listen to the podcast at 9 p.m. instead after dinner, right? That's an assumption that I'm making, right? That assumption comes from my judgments, right? And so taking a step back this morning, right, and realizing that, you know what? If I get all, and I started to feel myself getting tense this morning, and I know where that's going, right? I know the next step is to, raise my voice or snap at one of my family members or slam a door or something like that because I'm frustrated, right? I know that's where it's going to head, right? Because now that's not an assumption, that's not an expectation, that's not a judgment, that's knowledge, right? That's understanding the feeling of my body, the way in which my nervous system is interacting with what's happening right now, right? So therefore, right, when I started feeling that this morning, right, that's when I realized, like, wait a second, hold on a minute, let's take a few breaths, right? Let's not, and it's very crucial also that I didn't skip my meditation to get this done, right? And that's the whole point, right? That if I allow myself to get tense and aggravated and frustrated and allow that to get into my body, right? Well then I'm probably going to do a bad not effective podcast, right? Not only that, how am I showing up to the meetings that I have with people, right? People who rely on me to show up in a certain way, right? And so in a major way, in the interest of doing the work, I'm sabotaging the work, right? And so that's where it just, you kind of look at it and you say, okay, hold on a second. This doesn't make any sense. And so instead now, what do we got to do, right? What's the next step now? If you said accept, you're right. Because what I needed to do this morning was just to simply accept that this Wednesday morning, aka Monday morning for me, is simply going to be different from many others. It doesn't mean that it's worse. It doesn't mean that it's better. It means simply and exclusively that it's different. Better or worse is to be determined, right? That's still out there. We don't know what's going to happen there. It could wind up being that I record at 4 o'clock and I get messages from people like, oh my gosh, that was the worst podcast ever. And it came so late and it didn't benefit me at all. Art, what are you doing here? Okay, well now that's information and that's energy. Now I can take that in, and now I can make a logical and you know evidence-based redirection here, right? I can change my plans based on the information that has arisen, right? But to make assumptions is completely different, right? And so a lot of what we're talking about here with the acceptance and with the openness and the curiosity of mindfulness, right, is to see what happens, right? Record the darn podcast at 4 o'clock and see if there are any negative ramifications from that. See if maybe there are some positive ramifications. Maybe this is the way that I'll record my podcast forever, right? We just don't know. And that's the whole point, right? So allowing it to arise, allowing it to be, that's where we can sort of play with things and we can learn and we can discover at that point, right? Because as I say, who knows? Maybe recording at 4 o'clock is the best way to do it. How will I possibly know? Now, it turns out that I'm not recording it at 4 o'clock after all, because the meeting that I had scheduled that was kind of causing a little bit of this kerfuffle, it was canceled. And so that's the other point, right? That while I'm 2 hours ago getting frustrated and uptight for a meeting that was canceled, right? So imagine if it did go to the ultimate, negative place of me getting frustrated and yelling at my kids or something like that. And now the meeting's canceled anyway. Like, what? Look what I've done, right? And so that's just yet one more reason, one more piece of evidence that shows that it's just, it's always in our best interest to be present, to be accepting, and to be compassionate. I usually add curiosity onto there, but I think the curiosity is inherent in the presence, right? Because it's a curious presence, if you will, right? But when I can do those things, and again, it all comes out of the fountain of awareness, right? Like, if I'm not self-aware, then none of this occurs to me, right? None of this even pops up. Like I can't, I just, if I'm not aware, then what happens then is that, yeah, I slam the door, I yell, I whatever, and then I'm just seeing the consequences of that, right? I'm seeing my family be upset. I'm seeing me be upset. I'm seeing, whatever it is that's happening, but it's the results. That's the only way that I see it. Now, there is another aspect of mindfulness, right? And this is the absolute, I said the core before, but this is even deeper in the core, right? Which is the ability to sense in real time what's going on, right? Because it was that tension that I sensed in my body that allowed me to even consider any of this, right? Allowed me to even, again, be aware of it, right? And that awareness only comes through presence, right? Because if we're not present, right, if we're not truly here, truly grounded in the present moment, then I have no way of developing that awareness, right? It comes through the open presence and the acceptance and the compassion. So the other day, I'm in this course that it's called the Comprehensive 6-month course on interpersonal neurobiology, and it's hosted by Dr. Dan Siegel, who, back in the day, right, when I was, teenager or whatever. And yeah, even in my 20s, you ask me, okay, if there's anybody you could like go and have dinner with, who would it be, alive or dead? It'd be Jerry Garcia, it'd be David Bowie, it'd be Keith Richards, it'd be, maybe at various times it was authors and, like Tom Robbins at one point. Like, dude, I would want to go and sit down and, like have a couple of drinks with Tom Robbins and see what happens there, And there was, many others, right? But if you ask me now, it's like, give me Dan Siegel and give me Richie Davidson and give me, Dr. Bruce Lipton, who I'm just starting this book, this beautiful book. I'm just starting the Biology of Belief, was recommended to me by a friend. These are the people who I long to talk to. And I actually got to talk to Dr. Siegel. He told me to call him Dan. So like a one-on-one conversation. I just watched the replay because I was trying to, remember something that he said in the answer. I came off just like this blushing, groupie or something. It was so silly. But anyway, so in this course though, Dan, my friend Dan, says something really, really powerful. And this is something that he says it's their motto at what he calls the Mindsight Institute. That's his kind of, organization. And the quote is that, hold on, let me read it so I don't get it wrong. Pardon me, go to the little black book. Here it is. Okay. Integration made visible is kindness and compassion. Integration made visible is kindness and compassion. So what that is saying, what my dear friend Dan and the person who I idolize is saying, is that when we are in an integrated state, right? Now, there's many ways that we can integrate, right? There's a left-right integration of our brain. There's a front-back integration of our brain. There's a top-bottom integration of our brain. There's also the integration of our body, right? Like the real going down and integrating our gut and our heart with our brain, right? There's that integration. And then there's also the integration of outside of me, right? In the system of you and me, or what Dan calls we, right? So when we develop this integration on any of these levels, right, what's going to come out of that is a natural state of kindness and compassion, right? So in other words, when you are walking around in your life in a state of integration, then you are going to act in ways that are kind and compassionate. And so I ask you now, what about the opposite? And this is a lesson, I think, right? Because when we see someone who is, because really what we're saying here with this statement that Dan is saying, and he's really boiling down just, decades of research and understanding, right? Which is that the human brain, the human body, the human essence is wired and made to be compassionate and kind, right? That's why when we're in our optimized state, that's the only expression we have, right? It's not like we have to cultivate kindness and compassion when we're in an integrated state. Our integrated state create kindness and compassion, right? That is the expression. That is the integration made visible, okay? And so what that tells me is that our normal, natural state as human beings is kindness and compassion, right? You get that logic? So therefore, if we see somebody in our life who is acting in a way that is not kind and not compassionate, right? When we see the guy, rushing around the house in the morning and worrying about, this meeting that he has and starting to get cranky with his kids and these kind of things, well, if we see somebody like that, and for me, that would have been looking in the mirror this morning, which I did, I looked internally in my interoception and I saw that that's what was going on, right? And so as soon as I see that that's what's going on, and this is true for you too, right? If you go to the office today and your manager or your boss or whatever is in a cranky mood and not being compassionate and not being kind, even if that's the way your boss has been forever, it's a very clear sign that your boss lacks integration, right? It's a very clear sign that your boss is working in disintegration, or whomever in your life, right? Whether it's, somebody in your family who seems to be having a rough time, like I was this morning, right? Or somebody driving out on the road flipping you off, or somebody in a store that's, you know, elbowing their way in front of you to get to something, or somebody at a ticket booth who's snappy and angry with you, even though you've not done anything, right? Even if you had, right? When we see these things, when we can see this behavior in others or ourselves, right? When we see ourselves acting in ways that are not compassionate and not kind, so when we see it in ourselves or others, well, what we can recognize in that moment is that the person whom we're looking at, whether it's ourselves or someone else in our life, that person is currently disintegrated, right? They are currently working in a place that has no integration in their brain, in their body, in their relationships, right? And so what this means is that the normal sort of equation that we usually go through, right? Somebody's mean to me, I'm mean back to them, darn it, right? I'm not going to let somebody get away with that, right? Well, here's the thing. When we see somebody in that state, what we can do is we can recognize that, wow, this person's having a really hard time right now. And so maybe, just maybe, the best thing I can do is not to, throw myself down and say, you're not going to be mean to me. I'm not going to allow that to happen, right? Or to push back somehow, like, hey, what's wrong with you today? Why are you being so, grumpy today? Cheer up, man. Right? Like those are the normal sort of reactions that we sometimes have to people who are treating us with outside of compassion and kindness, right? But my challenge to you here, right, is to recognize that when that person is expressing themselves in that way, even if that's the only way you've ever seen them express themselves, when you see that kind of behavior that again lacks kindness and compassion, well, then that person is dealing with a state of a physiological and neurological state that is out of integration, and therefore they are experiencing either chaos or rigidity or some back and forth of both, right? But either way, what we know is that they are not feeling good, right? They are feeling very uncomfortable. They are probably, struggling very much, even if they would never tell you that, even if they don't even realize that they're struggling. They are. And it does not feel good when you're in a place of disintegration. In that place of disintegration, you can also know that these people are probably, and this could be true for you too, if you find yourself in a time lacking integration, and it can happen to anybody at any time, even somebody who's practiced for a decade here, right? It can happen, right? And when we notice it happening, right, what's the real beneficial thing that we can do is to try to bring some help to that person, right? Bring some understanding, bring some empathy and some compassion of our own to that person. And maybe, just maybe, We can inspire them. Because remember, as I told you last week, even just practicing compassion and kindness creates integration. It's not just a one-way street. It's an infinity sign, right? It keeps going, and it's reciprocal, and it's a feedback loop. It's self-fulfilling, if you will. And so when you see that disintegration in someone, well, consider offering them some kindness in that moment instead of fighting and pushing back. Allow it to be soft, and allow yourself to, again, in the openness and the curiosity of presence, see what happens. See what happens if I decide, instead of the usual, pushing back on somebody, instead I soften up, and I allow myself to show kindness in the face of unkindness, and see what happens. So some of you might be friends with me on Facebook, and you might have seen me post a little meme of this whole thing that we're talking, that quote yesterday. And so it got me thinking this morning, and I'll be honest with you, it's not just this morning. I have this post-it note on my desk so long it's like all wrinkled and doesn't even stick anymore. But the note says, create a Facebook group for this podcast. And so I did that this morning, right? While I had like 10 minutes before this, the call, that I didn't realize was going to be canceled. I had 10 minutes. I was like, okay, what do I do? So, well, I started a group. Okay. I started a group called Showing Up to Your Life. And I picked this like picture of some guy like kind of meditating in front of a sunset. I'm not married to that. It might change. We'll see. But I'm going to put the link to this group in the description here, okay? Because I think it's time for us to start getting social with each other, right? I really would love to see our little community here, grow into the social media kind of world. And the reason for that is because in Facebook groups, it's really kind of wonderful. Now, first of all, the group right now is public, right? But I plan, once we get some members in, probably make it private so we can really, share things here. And we can know that we're sharing it only with people who are, within the community, people who we can trust to support us and be compassionate and kind towards us, right? So for right now, it's public. I invite you to invite whoever you think would enjoy it, okay? And in this group, we can all share stuff, right? We can share memes, we can share ideas, we can even share jokes, whatever. Just throw in pictures of your cats or your plants or your dogs or your kids, whatever. It's all good. Like, it can be something where we can kind of break down this wall a little bit and get to know each other a little bit more, right? And you all get to know each other and get to know me, and I get to know you. And in this sense of community, some really amazing things can happen. All right. So I just started that. Today started the intention. It has been set. And so let's see what happens. All right. So I'll put this link in the description, and I invite you to just come on in. All right. And we'll see what happens. All right. Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks for listening. I wish you well, and I'll be back again tomorrow with what I hope is more helpful and encouraging information. So, I hope you're well, and I will be back again tomorrow, as I just said. And I wish you well. And that's worth saying twice. Take care, everybody.